Hey everybody, and welcome back to Advanced Course Academy Online. And there's a book I want to tell you about in a moment, but first, basically I want to introduce the author. There's an interview that I've done with Riks, who has been my all-time favorite author since I started my career. So if you're somebody who basically you want to start your career in hypnotherapy, you want to see your first client, you want to understand, or perhaps you're already seeing clients and you just want to take your business further, there's some real tips, some real tricks that are really going to get you forward. Now, a lot of this, if I can tell my story, is about vulnerability. Your message needs to go out in front of your offer, and I'm going to explain what that means. So when you make an offer to somebody, it's always going to be about you've packaged up your services, you've packaged up your solutions, because you can understand that your client has a problem or an ambition and you just want to help them out. But if you're not vulnerable in front of them, and I'm not saying unprofessional, but if you're not out there, if you're not exposed somehow with the armor off, then no one's going to quite get who you are. And that's why I want to introduce Riks in a moment, because I've been granted the privilege, because he's a big hero of mine. I've just been reading his books for years, and I've found that anytime I've had an issue with a client that I just can't quite help, I give them the book, and they come back a better client. They come back more knowledgeable, kinder, more committed. So if I can tell you a bit about my story, because I really just want to demonstrate the reason of having stories and what I've learned from Rick, and why you need to get out there, but not just get out there, but get out there with your armor off. So basically, when I grew up, before I get into hypnotherapy, before I got into business, before I became what some people might call a massive success, is that I had a skin condition called eczema in school, and I'd get my head kicked in for it. I'd be scratching my arms, scratching my legs. I looked like Freddy Krueger from head to toe, not as a burn victim, but just kind of out of stress. The more stressed I would get, the more lines and scratches I would do in myself. And my name stopped becoming Scott and started becoming Spot. And so this affected my self-esteem so much, plus I had this social impediment that I can be a little bit Aspergery sometimes, which is an advantage once you've learned how to use the Asperger tendencies, if that's what there is. The alternative to Asperger, they call it neurotypical, or normal, they're calling it. But I believe that title is due to the stage in history that we're at. So basically, being a bit Aspergery, being socially impaired, having role models that are just trying to figure out things the best they could, but I just couldn't work these things out for myself. I got teased, I got bullied, I got picked on, I got my head kicked in school, because I just didn't understand this social stuff. And so then once I just gathered this interest, this great interest in psychology, and understanding why do people behave the way they do? Who am I? How do I think? Am I normal? Am I okay? And I started to attract this group of friends, and they were such a great group of friends. They were a great group of friends, but at first, they liberated me. Then after a while, the sadness, or I suppose the great tragedy, is that they felt more safe when I didn't draw any attention to myself, because they'd been picked on themselves. And when they've been picked on, anyone in the group who gets out there, anyone in the group who actually takes a risk and says, all right, I'm the star now, I'm the big business person, I'm the big success. It's tall poppy syndrome in Australia. There's this story about the monkeys, not the band monkeys, but just some monkeys in some clinical trials, where they're in a cage, they've got a ladder, and there's bananas at the top of the ladder, and any of those monkeys that go to the top, all their friends get hosed down by the researcher. They did some pretty cruel experiments back then, but they learned some things about how we think, about how we are socially with each other. And so what happened is that anytime a monkey went up to get the bananas, the researchers would hose them down with a high-pressure hose. It was not pleasant. It was torturous to these monkeys, to the point where anytime the next monkey got hungry, wanted to go up to the bananas, wasn't happy with the research pellets to keep them alive, that all the monkeys would start kicking their heads in too. Like, "Arr, arr, arr." How can, if you go up that ladder, don't you know what you're going to do to the rest of us? And that's what I felt like in my group of friends. Like, it's almost like the mafia kind of going, stay with us and you'll be okay. But if you get out there, the wolves are going to eat you alive. And they kept taking old monkeys out of the cage and new ones in, to the point where only new monkeys were in the cage. So none of the old monkeys had ever been hosed down by the researchers. So now still, any monkey who crawled or tried to climb to the top still got their heads kicked in by the other monkeys, which means that we're the same as us. We're learning behaviors. We're getting told no by people who got scared because we've threatened their idea of safety because we're different. And this is where what I've learned in business, if you want to get ahead, if you are afraid to upset your friends, you can be loading these programs in your head that load fear. They load panic. They load all these old behaviors, damaging behaviors that are going to waste the rest of your lives, and you're going to pass that negative stuff on to your children as a legacy. Now, that was all in quotes there, because what I'm saying there is that is my story. I had to learn that when I put out an ad, when I put out a product, when I got married, I had to stand up and give a speech in front of people. When I did my first seminars, I had to, again, stand up in front of people. When I approached my first client, I had to stand up in front of people. And the program, you've guessed it, what loaded in my head? Fear. I wanted to feel safe, and the friends around me, as caring as they can be, they don't always want to see somebody get out there. And that's not because they're jerks. It's absolutely not. It's that it makes them feel unsafe. And so my message to you is that if you feel that you've got people in your life, it could be your mum, it could be your dad, it could be your kids, it could be your teachers, it could be anybody. If you've got people telling you, come on, Scott, or whoever it is, or whatever your name could be, if you get out there, oh, you're probably just going to fail. If you get out there, oh, you're probably going to go broke. If you go out there, who would want to listen to you anyway? You're some person on the internet, some person trying to make a sale. And this is the negativity that we can get and have to learn how to handle from the world. And so what I found is when I read Riks book, The Secret to Creating a Life Beyond Limits, I just instantly fell in love with the book. And for like something like 5 years, I'd reading his books, handing it out to clients. I'd never met him. Recently, I met him. And he let me do an interview. And so there's some advice that I have for anyone who's got a hero, they want to meet them. Ask them for an interview. I was the only person there that weekend who asked Rik for an interview. And so I want you to take a look at Rik as a man who wears his message on his sleeve. Besides his death surfing stories, which if you attend one of his breakthrough events, you're just going to love it. He teaches you how to think. He tells you that NLP is not just something that you learn, or NLP is not just something that you use, but you have to let NLP, you have to let coaching, you have to let hypnotherapy, you have to let these modalities use you. Because that's where change happens. When you allow it through all of the levels. As Rik kept saying to us at the breakthrough events, to know but not to do is to still yet not to know. It means that if you're not doing it, you haven't embodied, you haven't taken the message to the point where you can actually go out there and set yourself free. So I recommend everybody gets this book, because when I studied hypnotherapy, what I found is that I still, this book for me, when I read it, it gave me not just the concepts that I needed to help clients, but it gave me the methods of communicating. It gave me stories, that these stories still come back to me. So I want you to pay close attention to this interview that I'm so grateful for Rik to let me interview him. And he's doing this big 2-day event, and he lets me come and interview him. And it's just awesome. Like he's telling me about how he wrote the book. He's telling me about how he managed to get the whole sciencey side. And anyone who's read this book knows that you can't just write a book like this without something like 20 years of research. This is, and he described it, what it was, the Reader's Digest of psychology. It's all in here. If you were going to read one book and one book only, it's The Secret to Creating a Life Beyond Limits. Check out Rik's interview. Check out his message. And I'll see you on the other side. Until next time, I'm Scott from Advanced Course Academy Online. Check out Rik.